And to do that, we want to go to the Data View tab. So click on the Data View tab. And now when you do that, you should see, instead of VAR, for the first two columns, now we have our variable names that we just created a moment ago in the Variable View window. So we have the name exam score and then the variable name GPA in our first two columns respectively. And here in SPSS in the Data View window, the different rows typically are for different people. So for example, row 1, the first person's values on their exam or their exam score, and their GPA will be entered here. Then in row 2, we'll enter the values for the second person. So their exam score and their GPA will be entered here, and so forth. So let's go ahead and do this. For the first person, they got an 85 on their exam, so type 85 and then press enter. The second person got a 92 on their exam, so type that in and press enter. And then finally, the third person got a 72. So type that in, press enter. We can also use, as opposed to enter, we could use the arrow keys. So I'll use those now to move up to the first person's GPA. And as a quick note, if you see a period here, that's the way SPSS represents a missing value. That means SPSS thinks there's no value there and there should be one. And you know what? It's right. There should be a value under GPA, and we're going to enter it right now. So when we do enter the value, the period will disappear. So the first person's GPA was 3.25, so go ahead and enter that in. This time let's use the down arrow key to scroll down. The second person's GPA is 3.45, so enter that in and press the down arrow key. And then finally, the last person's GPA is 2.53, so let's enter that in. Okay, then I'll press enter just for practice using a different key. So notice here, now I have my values in for my three people. I have their exam score and their GPA entered in. And that's really it for creating a basic data set in SPSS. Let's go ahead and do a basic analysis as well before we close this tutorial. So to do that, go to Analyze on the menu bar. This is called the menu bar. Select Analyze, go to Reports, and to do that, you just hover your mouse, the pointer or arrow, over Reports, and you'll see this sub-menu opens up to the right. When we want to select one of these options, then we need to left-click the mouse. And what I want to do is select Case Summaries. So go ahead and left-click on Case Summaries. Okay, now under Case Summaries, what we want to do is, notice in SPSS we have our variables we created on the left, and we want to move these to the right if we want to analyze them. So notice exam score is selected by default. I'm going to go ahead and click this right arrow button on the first arrow here, the arrow for variables box. Click that, it moves it over. Then I'm going to go back and select GPA by clicking on it once with the left mouse button. Click the right arrow button under variables once again, and that moves it to the variables box. Now we could select some of these options and so forth. Click on statistics, click on options, but I just want to keep this very simple for this first tutorial. So we'll just go ahead and click OK. And when you do that, you'll see that a new window opens up in SPSS. And that window is called the Viewer window. Notice the name Viewer here. We'll just call it, the Viewer window, but we'll often refer to it as the Output window because it presents our output or the results of our analyses. Okay, so here in our basic output, we have this first table tells us for the variables exam score and GPA, we have 3 values that were included. We have 0 values that were excluded, and a total of 3 values. It doesn't really tell us a lot here other than to say that all of our values were included in our analysis, all 3 of them. In the second table, case summaries, and notice here we have our 3 values, person 1, 2, and 3, and here's the values we just entered into the data set. The first person had an exam score of 85 and a GPA of 3.25. Second person had an exam score of 92 and a GPA of 3.45, and so on. And then our total N indicates the number of values that were analyzed, 3 values for exam score, and 3 values for GPA were analyzed. Now finally, if we want to move back to our data editor window where we entered our data, we can either click on this here, notice it says Go to Data, or we can click on Window and go here to what's called the data editor as I just mentioned. Let's go ahead and do that. It brings me back to my data. This window, I didn't say it previously, it's called the data editor window, where we have 2 different views, the data view and the variable view. Okay, so once again, we create our variables by clicking on the variable view tab, as we did here, and then we enter our data by clicking on the data view tab, as we did here. This concludes the tutorial on entering basic values into SPSS.